Welcome, Ms Legalista here, aka Attorney Sheila. Today, we're taking both a look at something that happened in the past and something that's going to be happening in the future. Remember Kim Potter, the former police officer who shot and killed Duante Wright? Well, she is scheduled to be released next month. In this video, we're going to revisit some of the documents related to that case. We're going to talk about her release and a new light, something different that I want to talk about is this idea of impulse control, especially as it relates to a 20-year-old fleeing the police.
Yeah.
If you recall, and it has been a while, so I actually had to go back and do a little research on this just to make sure I had all of my facts right. Kim Potter is the former Brooklyn Center police officer. She was found guilty of first and second degree manslaughter in the killing of Duante Wright. Now, he was only 20 years old. I'll let you guys go back and pull up the video on that. You can see everything that happened. He got pulled. Three officers approached the vehicle. She pulled what she thought was her taser. It was not her taser, it was her gun. She fired it. It hit him. He took off in the car, crashed, and was killed. Let's go back to the documents. Enough of my going on and on about it. I want to pull up the actual documents because I want to refresh our memory, make sure we're all on the same page, even though I just did throw in a few facts there. It's always helpful to have these things right in front of you. So we're going to take a look at this criminal complaint and go through it. This is state of Minnesota. Now, keep in mind, this is the same state where the George Floyd incident occurred. And I guess I should also call that a killing because he was killed in Minnesota. Kimberly Ann Potter, this is the criminal complaint order of detention. Count one charge, manslaughter, second degree. Maximum sentence, 10 years and or $20,000. It says that on or about April 11th, 2021. So we're coming up on 2 years, the 2 year anniversary of this. And I can imagine that Duante Wright's family is probably still feeling a lot of pain about this, and especially the 2 year anniversary of it coming up in just a few days, and the fact that Kimberly Potter is going to be released. This is, I'm sure, not going to be easy for them to take. Kimberly Ann Potter caused the death of Duante Demetrius Wright by her culpable negligence, whereby Kimberly Potter created an unreasonable risk and consciously took a chance of causing death or great bodily harm to Duante Demetrius Wright. Okay, let's go over the actual facts here. And this is April 11th, 2021, at approximately 1:53 p.m., Brooklyn Center police officer Anthony Lucky and his field training officer, Kimberly Ann Potter, the defendant, conducted a traffic stop on a white Buick at 63rd Avenue North and Orchid Avenue North in the city of Brooklyn Center, Hennepin County. Officer Lucky and the defendant were each equipped with a department-issued body-worn camera. Officer Lucky identified the driver as Duante Demetrius Wright, the victim. Officer Lucky conducted a record check on the victim and discovered that he had a warrant for his arrest for a gross misdemeanor weapons charge. According to time-stamped body-worn camera footage, at 2:01 and 31 seconds p.m., Officer Lucky and the defendant both approached the driver's side of the vehicle, asked the victim to exit his vehicle and place his hands behind his back. The victim exited the car and initially followed commands. And if you have gone back and looked at that video, and I did take a moment to look at that video again before I started recording, he did. You can see him getting out of the car and he's complying, which makes you wonder at what point in his mind did he suddenly change his thinking around this? Because he was complying, and you can see that in the video. But something happened. The victim exited the car and initially followed commands. Officer Lucky told the victim that he was being arrested for his outstanding warrant. At that time, Officer Lucky and the victim were positioned just outside of the driver's side door of the vehicle, which remained open during their encounter, and defendant was positioned behind and to the right of Officer Lucky. I think it's interesting that they mentioned that the door remained open. And I don't know what the protocol is once you remove someone from their vehicle and you are in the process of handcuffing the person. At what point do you close the door? Do you have another officer come over and close the door? Just wondering what the protocol is on that since it is mentioned here. But the open door was what allowed Mr. Wright to get back in the vehicle. All right. At 2:01:49, the victim pulled away from the officers and got back into the driver's seat of the vehicle. Officer Lucky attempted to maintain physical control of him. At 2:01:55, the defendant verbalized that she would tase the victim. The defendant presented her department-issued Glock 9mm handgun in her right hand and pointed it at the victim, verbalizing again that she would tase him at 2:01:58. At 2:02, the defendant again verbalized taser, 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 and then pulled the trigger on her handgun at 2:02:01, firing one round into the left side of the victim. The victim then stated, he shot me, and the vehicle sped away for a short distance before crashing into another vehicle and coming to a stop. The victim was pronounced dead at the scene after medical intervention was unsuccessful. After discharging her handgun, the body-worn video reports the defendant exclaimed, "Yes, I just shot him." SSA McGinnis later collected and reviewed the layout of the defendant's duty belt. SSA McGinnis observed that the defendant's handgun is holstered on the right side of the belt and her taser is holstered on the left side of the belt. Both grips and handles of the defendant's taser and handgun face the defendant's rear, and the taser is yellow with a black grip. SS McGinnis noted the defendant's taser is set in a straight draw position, meaning the defendant would have to use her left hand to draw the taser out of its holster. On April 12, 2021, SSA McGinnis met with Hennepin County Medical Examiner Dr. Lauren Jackson. Dr. Jackson determined that the victim's cause of death to be a gunshot wound and the manner of death was a homicide. And then there you see the signature page there. So there you have the document that sort of sums back up the events of what is pretty much shown in the video. Now, part of the reason I wanted to talk about this was she's being released next month. It's already sort of out in the news. And I wanted to go back to one of the things that I kept coming across as people talked about this in the past. And there are a lot of comments on the victim's actions. The victim shouldn't have done this. The victim shouldn't have done that. One of the things that I keep thinking to myself is, I have a child around that age. And I know to what extent my child is or isn't ready to be a fully capable, mature adult, ready to always make the right decisions. And when you look at a circumstance where someone is under pressure, they're not sure, maybe they're scared and fearful, they don't know what's going to happen, what is the likelihood that we're going to be able to make the best decision? So I wanted to take a look at just some of the information out there about this. One of the sites that I went to was this article on NPR. It sort of summed this up pretty well, I think, in my opinion, but you guys can let me know whether you think it's doing a good job or not. But I'm going to add this article in here. It says brain maturity extends well beyond teen years. And I want to talk about some of the information that's in this article and to the extent that it applies in any circumstance like this when you have younger people involved. And this first piece is, under most laws, young people are recognized as adults at 18, but emerging science about brain development suggests that most people don't reach full maturity until the age of 25. So think about that for a second. What we're saying is we are going to treat you like you're an adult even though we know that you don't yet have the mental capacity of an adult. This has been accepted for so long, the age of 16 and 17 and 18 for licensing, and you've seen that sort of change over the years, right, where we've started to recognize that there needs to be this sort of graduated progression for getting your license. Well, why don't we look at that for other things? So we have this age of 21 where you can purchase alcohol. And so lots of people sort of think of that as being the age of maturity. That's the age in which your parents are no longer legally responsible for you. Is it time for us to revisit 21? I'm asking this question because I think it's a really good question. Before, maybe we didn't have the science, but now we actually have the science that says, hey, wait, hold up. 21 is not the right age. The right age really is 25. Isn't it now incumbent upon us to sort of revisit this? And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that someone who does something at age 21, 22, 23 shouldn't be responsible for their actions. But what I'm saying is, we haven't even said to ourselves that we're getting it wrong at 21 and that we need to figure out maybe there should be a progression from 21 to 25, especially if the scientific data is telling us what's going on with the brain. So let's not listen to me. Let's go back to this website because I want to show you exactly what it is saying about brain development. You guys, I'm not a doctor, which is why I was looking for an article here to sort of go over some of this. So there's this part here, and this is what I was talking about. Most of the privileges and responsibilities of adulthood are legally granted by the age of 18. That's when you can vote, enlist in the military, move out on your own. But is it the true age of maturity? And that's what I'm asking. A growing body of science says no. And this is what's going on in this article. And you see here, there's some information here about child advocates using this research to change laws about, and I don't think it should be just about foster care. I think we should be taking a really hard look at this. And again, maybe putting into practice things that actually match reality. Right now, we have something over here, some laws and some rights and things that we're granting, and they don't really match what the reality of the situation is. Maybe we need to take a look at that. I love this part down here. This is probably, to me, the best part of this article. This part, this question and this answer, is this idea that the brains of 18-year-olds aren't fully developed a matter of settled science? And the person responds, yes. And I'll let you go back and look up who she is and her credentials. But she says, yes, the car rental companies got to it first. Exactly. Remember, car rental companies were just like, no, you are too young. We are not going to be renting cars to you. That is just a no, it's not going to happen. They were the first ones. They were like, yeah, we've looked at the data, and our insurance companies have looked at the data too. It says, but neuroscientists have caught up, and brain scans clearly show that the brain is not fully functioning, developing, not fully finished developing until about age 25. Until age 25. Let me scroll down a little bit further here. It says, so the changes that happen between 18 and 25 are a continuation of the process that starts around puberty. So again, this idea of a progression and not just saying at 18, hey, here, you're good, you're good. 21, you're good, you are good. Because that is not what's true. Okay. They're actually start to talk about some of the physical changes here. And I want to see if I can find it, you guys. You know, I saw it when I was reading the article, and now, of course, I don't see it. But it says, are the physiological changes in the brain in terms of the development of young people as significant an impact as the cultural changes and the environmental changes? And this person starts to talk through all of this. It says, for instance, a 20-year-old is 50% more likely to do something risky if two friends are watching than if he is alone. Is there a difference between males and females? Females' brains develop on an average 2 years earlier than male brains. Now, some of you are probably going to say, well, Sheila, now you're starting to take this too far. You're going to have this progression from 18 to 25, and you're going to want to do something different for females and for males. What I'm asking for us to do is to go back and take a look at this and to see what changes we might want to make, given that we have this data that's telling us the truth that for some reason we don't want to accept. All right, let's scroll down a little bit here. One of the things that deprived childhood causes is problems with prefrontal cortex function. So, somebody who has had an unstable home life is more likely to have trouble with planning and organizing behavior and with inhabiting, I think that's maybe supposed to be inhibiting impulses than somebody who has had a stable life. Now, think about that. It takes a while for us to start to build that. There's no light switch on for impulse control and light switch off. It doesn't work that way. It's a gradual progression. So when do we get to this point where we start to recognize that with our laws? So this whole prefrontal cortex thing is, I think, a really big deal. And I wanted to see if there was anything else in here that I wanted to go over with you. This is the last part that I want to talk about. So the person says to not be too clinical in the spin that we put on this. What parts of the brain are we talking about, and what changes happen between the ages of 18 and say 25? The response is, so the changes that happen between 18 and 25 are a continuation of the process that starts around puberty. That's what I just said. Go down and it says their prefrontal cortex is not yet fully developed. That's the part of the brain that helps you inhibit impulses and to plan and organize your behavior. So I just want to hone in on that as I sort of go back to talking about this case, because I think that that was a really big deal. It was one of those things that sort of hit home with me when I was looking at the video and reading the comments. There are so many comments that don't take into account that this was a 20-year-old young man. 20 years old. I like to tell people they've only been making complete, thoughtful sentences for about, I don't know, 7 or 8 years now. Okay. But we expect them to think like fully grown adults that have the wisdom that we have. Well, they don't. Most of them are pretty ignorant and still have a lot to learn. And a lot of you may want to call me out on that and say, Sheila, you're putting down young people. No, I'm talking about the science of biological development here. What is actually going on with the brain? I'm talking to you about what the science says, not what I think. And ignorant is not meant to be a derogatory word. It is meant to portray the fact that we don't know as much as we think we know. And I include myself in that. But one of the things that we can start to take into consideration when we're reading about some of these cases, especially cases involving young people, is to stop placing them in our shoes. We tend to go, oh, well, they should have done this and they should have done that. And we forget that they're only 20, 21, 22. They are not fully developed yet. Their brains are not fully developed yet. And we need to stop talking as if they are. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that they shouldn't take responsibility for their actions. Excuse me. I'm not saying that they shouldn't take responsibility for their actions, but what I'm saying is we need to do a better job of incorporating our own evaluations of someone else's behavior from the perspective of reality and not just what we think a person ought to be doing based on the fact that we just think that, right? I just think they should have done this. I just think they should have done that. Well, here's what the science says that they were probably going to do in that situation. They're not going to be thinking clearly. They're going to be fearful, scared, I don't know, out of control, less impulse control, because that's what it's saying, less impulse control. So if it doesn't make sense to an older person as to why you would flee, why you would get back in the car. As one person said, why would you get back in the car? Why would you drive off? You're now shot. Where are you going? What are you thinking? The whole point is the person's likely not thinking clearly. The person's probably not thinking clearly. And unfortunately, hated to see this happen. And it resulted in this person's death. So there's a way that we need to start to have more conversations to put some things in place to help our young people when they're in these situations so that it becomes more of a checkbox. Now, I know some parents do this a lot. They're just like, hey, if you get pulled, here are the things you need to do. Here's the order. Do the this, the this, the this, the this. Okay. And they have a plan and we're going to practice. And this is what you're going to get used to doing. And maybe we can embed that in you because we know that your first instinct is going to be, oh my God, my parents are going to kill me. Oh my God, how do I get out of this? Oh my God, I don't want to die. Oh my God, I'm just going to run, if they're even thinking through that clearly. So take some of this for what it's worth or for what it's not worth. I don't know. Do your own research and figure out, maybe what we can do around this. Again, like I said before, Kim Potter is about to be released next month. I'm sure the parents are having, their own sort of trauma related to this, knowing that going into the second year. And I believe Mr. Wright had a young son also. And so they're reminded of him every day, probably. That's a lot, you guys. I'm going to let you guys handle that because I've talked a lot in this particular video, which is something that came up and I thought it might be worth having a conversation about. So hopefully this gives you a little bit more information. Whether or not you agree with it, I don't know. You can put in the comments your thoughts around this. But please go ahead and give the video a thumbs up if that gave you additional information. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you want to stay up to speed with some of the topics that I'm discussing that are, I guess, legal in nature. Peace.